Transgender people can be legitimately excluded from single-sex services if the reasons are, quote, justifiable and proportionate, the government's equalities watchdog says.
Yes, guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission says justifiable reasons could surround concerns of privacy, decency, to prevent trauma or to ensure health and safety. Joining us now is Maya Forstater, the Executive Director of Sex Matters, a group that campaigns, advocates and produces resources to promote clarity around sex in public policy. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Maya. Could you just bring some clarity in terms of why the Equalities Watchdog has done this, and perhaps some of the reaction from advocates of gender self-identification? Don't they want to change this to kind of get rid of those exemptions under the Equality Act? Could you just explain it a bit more for our viewers?
Yes. So this isn't new law or a change in the law. This is just clarifying what the law already says about single-sex services, which is that you are allowed to have them in a whole range of ordinary situations, from changing rooms, toilets, showers, women's refuges, healthcare, hospitals, and so on. And that when somebody self-identifies as being the opposite sex, or being no sex, or having their sex change from day to day, that doesn't mean that their sex has really changed. And that they should be allowed into opposite sex services. That's what the law says. But organisations like Stonewall have been telling employers and service providers that people should be allowed to self-identify into opposite sex spaces. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission has stepped in to provide clarity about what the law really says, and to avoid people having to negotiate and argue and end up in hostile situations where the rules are not clear.
And Mike, could you just describe to us some of those situations where it is important to have a single sex space? So you alluded to changing rooms, but we are now having a big discussion in relation to sports, balancing inclusivity over fairness. That presumably would be an example where, for fair competition, single sex protections must be paramount.
Absolutely. Sports is a slightly different part of the law because the exceptions for sport are different from the exceptions for single-sex services. So this new guidance doesn't cover sport. But what the law says is if you have a sport, and this covers most sports, where the average difference between male and female competitors mean that usually men have an advantage, you're allowed to have separate sports for men and women. And that means you need to have clear rules. And people, transgender activists would like to have males being able to play in female sports. And many sports governing bodies have allowed that. But what we know is that even if somebody reduces their testosterone for several years, it doesn't reduce their advantage to a level where it's either fair or safe.
But, okay, look, I'm just asking because I'm intrigued, actually. If a woman transitions, quotes and quotes, transitions into manhood, right, and they're on testosterone, etc., and they, have been doing that for a number of years, then in the same sex space, then what would happen there? Would they have to stay in the women's changing rooms as well? Would women be happy with that?
This is why I say sport is different from single-sex services. So in terms of sport, the answer is you have two categories, open and female. And the open category, anyone can compete in, because it's not a question of privacy or dignity. It's just a question of fairness and safety. So a woman who takes testosterone would be excluded from female sports anyway, because that would be doping, but would be able to play in an open category. So would a man who transitions to being...
Spaces, though, I'm sorry, I should have been clearer. Yes. What about the same-sex space?
Yeah. So in most situations, the obvious solution is to offer a unisex alternative, gender-neutral alternative. So you have male, female, and an option for people who don't want to declare what their sex is, don't want to answer questions. No one should be asked about their diagnosis, their surgery, whether they have a gender recognition certificate. So the obvious solution is to have places that don't have a sex-based rule, so that anyone can go to the cinema or to university or the shops or wherever, or to the gym. Everyone has a place where they can change with privacy and wash. And where those places are single sex, it's clear that means single sex, and you offer an alternative. And that's pretty much what the EHRC guidance says.
But Maya, I mean, isn't this the very reason why organisations like Stonewall and others are campaigning for self-ID? Because if you are a trans person in the UK right now, your identity, is a point of intense political debate. And this guidance effectively reaffirms that even though you may have a gender recognition certificate, you may have gone through the full procedure and have made a very significant commitment to living life in a way that would be opposite to the norms with regard to your birth sex, that you are being told effectively that there are still spaces where your identity would not be recognised as equal and legitimate to the one that you want to present towards society. So isn't the guidance only reaffirming the perspective of Stonewall and others that actually self-identification would just make it much easier for transgender individuals to get access to the spaces that reflect what they understand as who they are?
Well, I think you have to make a distinction between someone's identity and the reality of their sex. Most males most people who go through transition don't necessarily have surgery. And that doesn't mean that their identity is any less real than somebody who does. Jamie Wallis MP identifies as transgender. Who am I to say whether his identity is legitimate or not? But Jamie Wallis should not be in a women's changing room. And if Jamie Wallis made a commitment to wear women's clothing, I don't think Jamie Wallis should be in a women's changing room. And what a person does with their body, with their doctor, is their own business.
No. I think Jamie Wallis could wear whatever dress he wanted. He should still never be allowed in a women's changing room. And I think that's absolutely fair enough. How do you feel about the pressure that comes from the trans lobby? I spoke a little bit earlier on about even maybe it's infiltrating our legal community, certainly infiltrating our education system, about the way now that if you say women are women, then you can get cancelled and you can be kind of sacrificed at the altar of wokedom, whereas I'm not sure that should be the case. And it does mean that then when we have discussions like this, there's always seems to be an element of controversy about it. And actually that means that a lot of negatives can slip through the net. How do you feel about the pressure that's coming from the trans lobby?
Absolutely. I mean, I lost my job for talking about this on social media and really saying the kinds of things that the Equality and Human Rights Commission have now put in their guidance, which were judged by some people at my work to be so contentious that I should lose my job, and have been fighting a legal battle for the past 3 years to show that that's discrimination. And that's happening all over the place, where people are being called transphobes and being bullied and harassed at work. It's because they're saying the kinds of things that the EHRC is saying, which is that women and girls need to be able to have single-sex services in sports.
And did that damage your mental health at the time?
It damaged my well-being.
Your personal well-being. Yeah, exactly. Because this is
absolutely.
it. Because this is the very thing that they go, well, hang on a minute. I must be allowed to do what I want to do because I'm potentially being bullied and harassed, and it's damaging my well-being. And then but then they're perfectly happy to do all of those things to you, aren't they?
Exactly. And the situation we should have is a tolerant society where people can believe different things, people can wear what they want, call themselves what they want, but where sex matters, such as in sport, such as in single-sex services, we have clarity. That's the only way that you can then treat everyone with respect, because people then know where they're allowed to go and where they're not.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Maya Forstater, Executive Director of Sex Matters. Thank you. It's a very important subject, and I think it's good that we're raising awareness of it. I mean, you cannot change your sex. You are born with the sex that you have. Your sex is determined by your reproductive organs, and until there is, a miraculous, scientific discovery where you can, become pregnant, and women can, do other things that males do. You can't change your sex.
Yeah. No, exactly. And also, look, as a man, I'm very I actually feel very bad about what's going on because it seems like it's mostly men telling women what a woman is. And if you look at who the heads of a lot of the athletics bodies are all around the world, the vast majority of them are men. And they are the ones deciding whether or not a man can become a woman and compete against women. And you know, again, as a man, I feel very bad about this. I feel like my gender is letting people down.
And the strange thing to me, I've never been someone that was identified as a feminist or been interested in feminist activism. But this is actually pushing me to consider, you know, feminism, because you are seeing your rights and protections and status as a woman completely redefined on the whim of a kind of fringe minority of activists. Then it makes you think, actually, we need to organise as women to protect our rights and interests.
Rise up. Rise up. Anyway, right, okay, moving on.